presentation downloaded, we'll just share screen. And then I think Melissa's. Yes, I think so too. So yeah, do you know which one of you all is going first?
I think we're just gonna follow the program.
Yeah.
Me, you, Melissa.
Yeah. So when you share screen, share them first and then, yeah, just run through. All of that and then. The other main thing, that I don't know if it's good, but we'll just make sure we have like a little bell mic for each of you. So you'll just turn that on and then the receiver's in here. Thinking about visual. So yeah, and you can just.
And
test.
it'll already have them as co-hosts, right? So they can share the screen.
That you're gonna share the screen of their PowerPoints.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, yes, the ones that I just opened. Okay.
Yeah, so you'll share that screen, and then this should be, will you check that one either for me? So if you'll go. Yeah, if you'll do the little caret next to it. And it should be on, yeah, it's on the right one. Hello, test. Great. Okay, so that's basically all you need to do. You can just share screen and do that when they're ready to have their PowerPoint up. Otherwise,
There's just two.
there's just this one and you can pass it to each other.
Yeah, we could either like.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, either repeat it or, yeah.
Yeah, and then John David will also be moderating the Hoover chat and like the Hoover Q&A, so y'all don't have to.
Okay. I didn't know that was.
There's a lot going. We're trying to take, y'all can just present.
And I am doing that through
Your computer.
not my personal computer. I asked to borrow one from.
Oh, let me go ask Sarah that. Because I knew there was something else happening. Cool. I wasn't so huge.
Okay, thank you.
Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, I know the first time's weird, so I just sort of.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Melissa. Can you hear me okay?
Can.
Great. I don't know if there's a camera.
Is that it?
Yes.
Um,
Melissa's first screen. Okay.
Silly question, right?
Did you have a question for me?
No, we were just checking that you were able to share your screen.
Oh, okay. Do you want me to do it really fast or?
Only if you need, if you want to on your end.
I mean, I think we're fine.
Okay. You good if I get started? Okay.
I'm gonna be here, I'll be done in just a second.
Oh, I mean, you can stay, you know, it's fine, you're good. Okay. Okay, good morning, everybody. We're gonna get started. So first off, thank you all for coming to this first session of the conference. We're so excited to have you all here. My name is Lauren Garsky, and then I have my colleague Sarah Austin and colleague as well, Melissa Forbes on Zoom. So I'm gonna get us rolling today. Our plan is we'll kind of each present and then we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A. Martha Townsend quotes a dean who sums up my life. WAC programs and WI courses don't run by committee. They need somebody who knows what's going on and who worries about them all day, every day. I am that worrier. So in this presentation, first, I'm going to talk about all the worrying, which includes how I ended up in this role in the first place. Then I am going to discuss the threshold concepts that actually helped me shift the worrying and what threshold concepts have enabled me to do in terms of my own confidence as the WAC person at my university, and some of the programmatic development I have been doing related to threshold concepts. In starting with the background, I do so for transparency. As you can see, this has been happening for only a couple years. And when I attended the WAC Summer Institute, one of the best moments was recognizing how many people were in similar spaces. Reading and learning from established programs is so important, but also intimidating when you are only at the beginning, especially a beginning where you did not expect to be at and are then the WAC person. So I am at Gannon University. We are a small liberal arts Catholic university up in Erie, Pennsylvania. 4 years ago, the university decided that we would begin revising our liberal core. We have finished that process, luckily. But it led to the mandating of writing intensive courses. Now, I joined that liberal core task force in the summer of 2020 after they had gathered data about the core from surveys, and when discussions of what the revised core would look like were ongoing. And to be honest, I have no idea where WIs came from. I was in a meeting at one point, and this is what the chair showed on the screen, and I was like, what is this? This had never been mentioned up until that point. And then we started having discussions about it, and alarm bells just start going off for me because it was very clear that we had no idea what we were getting into. So what did I do? I snitched to my department chair. So here's the thing, I was on a 4-5 teaching load, and that fall was only the second year at my university. I knew very little about WAC, but then throughout fall of 2020, when it got mandated, and then spring 2021, I was being expected to talk about it. So I had to talk to the task force, I had to talk to my department, I had to talk to my chair, I had to talk to my dean, I had to talk to the provost, who is now our president of the university. So people were looking at me to know things. I was doing all the research I possibly could about WAC and WIs, and y'all, I have a 10,000 word long document of notes, but that is where I drew the line. I was only going to do research. So this was both a good and a bad thing. On one hand, I could talk, and I was emphasizing to everyone I met with the need for support for these WIs, defining WIs in WAC, and that we shouldn't just stop with WIs because one required course with 2 learning objectives isn't going to change a whole lot in terms of writing. And we should really look at WAC at Gannon. If WIs were going to be mandated and people are using terms like WI and WAC, I wanted them to know what they were saying and what was needed to do this. As my dean shared in an email in response to the sport that was needed, which you can see a clip of at the top of it, she said the provost has been bringing up this need in other contexts, which I think is positive. However, in understanding the features of longstanding and successful programs, one of them is a director who has a grounding in theory, research, and assessment. Despite having 10,000 words of notes, I did not think that was me. Even though I really thought Gannon needed a WAC program or something to support these WIs at the university. So I had my feet in 2 worlds. I was essentially arguing to everybody, like, we need to hire somebody if we want to do this. And then I want to learn from that person how they do all of this. But I was fully preparing that that would not happen because who's hiring during COVID? We certainly weren't. So if that's the case, then, well, I want that job then. So here's the key though. I did not want my university thinking I could do any work related to the WIs and WAC on that teaching load. Because another feature of successful programs is that you have adequate release from your teaching. This is not a side hustle. So the university could not ask any more labor of me. So I carefully began asking for things that I needed. So attending the 2021, which then became the 2022 WAC Summer Institute, attending the 2021 IWAC conference, and talking about WAC being situated in our Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. In late summer 2021, my dean made a direct proposal to the provost for me to serve as the coordinator. The asking for my needs plus the proposal were laying the seeds for slowly building this WAC program, more so in keeping with what are successful programs. So y'all, I became coordinator fall 2021, and I had a serious confidence issue. On page 2 of the Sustainable WAC book, Michael McCloud shared a vignette about a WAC failure. And this was from a group chat that Sarah was in. I said how, wow, this kind of sounds exactly like what Gannon is doing. And mind you, then continued to do for another year. And as important as holding firm to not doing more labor was, behind the scenes, I had a year of research that perhaps pointed to we're in a bit of trouble. So that was a serious confidence boost to the starting of all of this. But then here came my, to quote Oprah, aha moment. Susan McLeod says, WAC is uniquely defined by its pedagogy, aimed at transforming pedagogy at the college level, away from lecture mode to a model of active student engagement with material and genres of the discipline through writing. It draws on many pedagogical techniques used in general composition courses, but it focuses around a particular body of information. Townsend echoes this sentiment in saying most programs are interested in overall pedagogical change. So yes, as a coordinator, I have to make sure I have a grounding in WAC research, theory, and assessment. But when I'm thinking about pedagogy and what I'm doing in the classroom, I go back to threshold concepts. This is kind of the first moment when I went, oh, I can do this. I'm okay in this position. So while the WAC statement of principles and practices argues that we should have this grounding in the research and theory and assessment, I argue a grounding in WAC research needs to include threshold concepts. And that is especially important for those of us who are taking on this leadership role when that was never a part of our vision we had for our careers. As Carter argues, what we do in our writing classroom is determined implicitly or explicitly by our concepts of what it means to be an expert writer and how writers attain expertise. When I teach, and even to how I speak to anyone about writing, is based on the research and the knowledge of writing. So I have come to see myself as a walking billboard for my WAC program. I appreciate the further advice from McLeod and Sovin to always be defining WAC, what it is and isn't, but it's not only WAC, but overall writing and writing studies that I need to be defining and talking about. Thus, I take every opportunity I can to talk about what we know, But this is done with the goal of, while I will continue to be the worrier, I can't create any significant change or cultural shifts alone at my university. I need a community and the confidence to actually create that community. So we know threshold concepts are not just for those of us in writing studies. As Adler, Kastner, and Wardle state, threshold concepts of writing studies speak both to and beyond our disciplinary community. This is because the subject of our discipline, composed knowledge, is widely relevant. There are also threshold concepts from writing studies that can assist writers and teachers of all sorts, whatever their disciplinary or professional affiliations. They are to be used outside of writing studies, as the concepts can be positioned differently for different audiences. I see a call to action when they state, if we want to actively and positively impact the lives of writers and writing teachers, we must do a better job of clearly stating what our field knows and helping others understand how to use that knowledge as they set policy, create programs, design, and fund assessments, and so on. So in Changing Conceptions, Changing Practice, Glotfelter et al. Discuss how they were guided by the threshold concept framework in designing the How Faculty Writing Fellows program. They say too how they are not the first to argue for the relevance of the threshold concept framework to writing across their curriculum faculty development efforts. For me, threshold concepts are not only part of the faculty development effort, but my own grounding as someone building a WAC program. So let's do the work of this program. I had been thinking of what would be at the core of what then I hoped would be a WAC program, even if I didn't get approval to build the WAC program, but what was then at the core of what I was even just doing with our mandated writing intensive courses. What was and wasn't this work? I ultimately decided at the core of what I was doing was reflection, threshold concepts, and community. My goal is a WAC program grounded in writing pedagogy and best practices, and I see reflection, threshold concepts, and community as guiding lights for that. Sharing threshold concepts becomes equally important to creating disciplinary colleagues for me and creating a community invested in writing. Chris Anson argued all threshold concepts are as relevant in courses and departments across the university as they are in centralized composition courses like first-year writing. So naming what he knows, he shares threshold concepts he sees as most important to WAC. Drawing on and considering my own context, I identified several threshold concepts that became particularly relevant, which you can see I've listed them here. So one of the first places I started using threshold concepts was during cross-campus meetings. So I'm only was in my second year, then my third year. People didn't really know who I was. So I took it on to start meeting with every single department chair who had a WI course. So I was using all of the research I had done, and I developed a questionnaire that I took and then had these meetings. Overall, I really wanted to listen. I didn't want to talk too much during the meetings beyond asking questions or for further clarification. But as my colleagues said things that aligned with what we know about writing, I started to confirm and affirm them. So the chemistry department, which the chair there is just my favorite person in the whole world at our university, he was talking about how different genres have different expectations and the importance of audience. I was like, yes, these are all things that we should be doing. So I was confirming of like, yes, this is what genre means. This is what it means to be in a discipline. This is what it means that writing is a rhetorical activity. So then what also became one of the foremost places I incorporated the threshold concepts was through our Writing Institute, which included a 4-day summer workshop and then monthly meetings throughout the semester. It was designed to work with instructors who were creating or revising their WI courses. Workshops are at the heart of WAC programs. If faculty are being asked to focus not only on assigning writing, but then writing instruction, they need to be prepared to teach writing. In saying the program is grounded in writing pedagogy and best practices, this means that the workshops are actually modeling the pedagogy I'm promoting, a technique I learned from Marty Townsend. I also wanted a faculty development model that supported continued growth of writing by helping instructors to develop methodologies they can apply beyond this one WI course, because again, that's not going to make significant change, but they could take what they were learning and use it in other courses as well. So what I'm going to do is share a couple of activities from that workshop, all of which are grounded in threshold concepts. So day one of the Institute during the summer is about establishing disciplinary values and foundations in writing studies. As I shared on the agenda, the goal was to develop a shared vocabulary regarding writing concepts and terms, as well as identifying our disciplinary specific assumptions, expectations, and expertise in writing in the discipline. So with that as my goal, my objectives was, again, listening. What are their needs and values? I want people to talk about their courses, their curriculum, what they're trying to get students to do, rather than me jumping in with all the things they need to do to teach writing effectively. I also want to understand how they're conceptualizing writing. How do they imagine writing ought to be working? Is it a general skill, a process? Is it rhetorical? What are the kinds of assignments, their own process? What is and isn't on their radar? I wanted to learn all about their disciplines. So with the identifying and describing writing characteristics and abilities, which was one of the activities we did on that first day, faculty completed a chart in which they answered 2 questions. What characterizes academic and professional writing in the discipline? And what writing abilities should students graduating in your major be able to demonstrate by the time they graduate? So this comes from Pamela Flash's WEC model. So while that is focused on an entire department, I still kind of wanted to see what happens if we just use this at least with individuals within a department. As experts in our field, Flash argues we all have assumptions about discourse relevant writing. In other words, we have assumptions about writing, what writing should look like, and how it is best learned. This in turn affects how writing is integrated into our classrooms. That disciplinary and professional identities are constructed through writing is something we know. As Eastrom states, disciplines have particular ways of asking and investigating questions enacted through and demonstrated in writing. And writing is an expression of our disciplinary identity. So this is getting actually faculty to articulate what it is that writing is for them in writing. So this actually sets up the activity for day 2 then. On day 2, it's building on our understanding of writing and our disciplinary expectations to design a writing assignment and to approach assessment as a starting point and not as the end point. So they create a rhetorical genre chart. The idea comes from an article, Assignments and Expectations by Danielitz et al. They share our goal is to help faculty identify the genres they hope students will compose. The first step in this process is prompting the faculty member to shift their expectations from a tacit or dimly felt sense of the desired form students will produce and move them to an explicit identification of a genre. We do not, however, advocate for simply picking genres arbitrarily, but rather imagining a real world situation that calls for a particular genre. I knew research papers were kind of a common writing in some of my participants' courses, and ultimately they can assign whatever kind of writing they want, but I wanted them to understand that the WIs are not telling them, oh, you have to do a research paper in this class, but more so, how does the genre connect to and do the work of your discipline or your profession? So ultimately from both these days, I wanted faculty to see that the responsibility for teaching the ways of knowing and doing in their discipline also extends to writing, which is not separate from, but essential to their discipline. Writing is not additional content, but the content. Threshold concepts then that I am getting across from these 2 days are writing speaks to situations through recognizable forms. Genres are enacted by writers and readers. Writing is a way of enacting disciplinarity, and disciplinary and professional identities are constructed through writing. One of the things that the summer workshop did, and which has continued to remain, is that we are continually sharing. As the semester began then, and they began teaching these courses, we've had more of an opportunity to reflect. As McLeod and Sylvan share, when we have created a program that helps such teachers break out of their isolated classrooms and share ideas about writing and about good pedagogy in general, we have also helped to create a community of teachers and writers. A surprising outcome I have found is that faculty members talk about slowing down. They talk about doing less to focus more on the instruction and have more time and the amount of scaffolding that they're doing in their classrooms now. This then makes me think of how these faculty are coming to threshold concepts without me even explicitly identifying them, such as writing is not natural. Learning to write effectively requires different kinds of practice, time, and effort. Revision is central to developing writing. With the sharing and creation done through cross-campus department meetings and a summer institute, I want to end with one of the most surprising places where threshold concepts have become integral, which is actually my own English department. Kevin Rusin shares how the threshold concept of writing as a social and rhetorical activity is troublesome because it conflicts with the shorthand descriptions we use to talk and think about writing. So I go to the phrasing that I'm assuming all of us have all heard in this room, my students can't write. And what I now understand from that phrasing is that we are not talking about the same thing. We are talking about writing very differently. So in order to solve the problem of hearing from colleagues, my students can't write, I have to understand what in fact the problem is. Because of the knowledge I have about writing, i.e. our threshold concepts, I talk and I think about writing in ways that are conflicting with those at my own university and even in my department. So while students may struggle with writing, because who doesn't, that is actually a lower level problem. And thus saying students can't write is actually a symptom of another higher level problem. So with higher level problems, they're broader, they're more general, they're more difficult to do something with, more difficult to do something about. The higher level problem is that how others conceptualize writing. So not just like, oh, our students can't write, but actually how are the people saying that conceptualizing writing? So to develop a solution for the problem, I have to work with everyone, including my own department, such that we all understand the threshold concept of writing is a social and rhetorical activity. Writing is a knowledge-making activity. Writing mediates activity. So as much as we look outward with WAC, not wanting to be seen as an English thing or belonging to the English department, I think it's important to look at who's standing next to us, which includes our department, which for at least for me, they're not writing scholars. It isn't just me that has to think and talk about writing, but they do as well. So this means I need to be defining writing, differentiating between it as a skill and an activity, and making the connection to critical thinking explicit. So these are slides that I use not only on day one of the Writing Institute, but now I use them in departmental workshops. Basically, if anybody wants me to talk about writing, these are kind of my first slides that I insert into whatever presentation. As Glattfelter et al. Share, helping faculty to change their conceptions about writing and learning work empowers them to then reimagine not only their individual assignments and courses, but also their programmatic curricula, and in some cases, departmental culture. So overall, writing is a shared responsibility among all faculty, and it's essential to all disciplines. If we want to actively and positively impact writing, we want to be collaboratively developing these threshold communities. Ultimately, threshold concepts in these communities provide an opportunity to extend who are writing scholars, pointing towards a more expansive field of writing studies. I'm gonna pass it along to Sarah. Okay. Oh, that's me. Yes, you did.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Austin, and I am here from Advent Health University. In the spring of 2021, the English faculty at Advent Health University, which includes myself, my colleague in her role as vice chair, and my other colleague in her role as director of the Writing Center, were made aware of several conversations on campus centered around concerns of students writing in entering the graduate programs. For some context, Advent Health University is a small, private, religious health sciences university located in Orlando, Florida. We were recently designated a Hispanic serving institution, and our total student population is around 1,400 students, which includes, I think, around 400 grad students. So as a result of these conversations, we, the three of us English faculty, wrote a proposal to begin with a writing across the curriculum at AHU. And since my two colleagues already have administrative positions, as essentially the WPA and director of the Writing Center, I was the only one that could do that. So that task fell to me. Yeah. So in the rest of this presentation, I'm going to talk about one of the projects that has emerged over the last, I guess now it would be 2 years, which is weird, in collaboration with the nursing department and some of the resulting kind of concessions and compromises that emerged, and end with where we are now, which hopefully will leave plenty of time for discussion and questions. So in my proposal, I was particularly interested in exploring the question posed by Hassel and Phillips in Materiality and Writing Studies. For whom does the discipline of writing studies exist? Whose interests, experiences, and values does it reflect? And I'm particularly interested in these questions because of my positioning within the university. So in 2021, there was some reorganization, and my department, which is essentially a kind of pseudo college, and I'm part of the Department of Health and Biomedical Sciences, and we were moved under the umbrella of essentially the Dean of Student Services. Yeah. So clinical programs such as nursing, imaging, healthcare administration moved to our Dean of Operational Strategy and Learning. Whatever that means. And I bring this up because for 2 reasons. The first is, as rhetoricians, there's a lot of power in naming and kind of the messaging that is conveyed by organizations and where departments are on campus. And the second reason that I mention this is that this is kind of the landscape when they were like, okay, we would like a WAC program. Have fun. Yeah. I should add that since this initial reorganization, the nursing department has become its own school and they now have a dean. So things are slowly shifting in that landscape. Yeah. But from a sustainability perspective, there are certainly problematic elements within this landscape. However, I would like to focus on one project, and that is kind of the collaborations that evolved between myself and the nursing department that I'm hoping is leveraging into something more sustainable. So shortly after my colleague in the Writing Center was contacted by the nursing department, they were starting a DNP program, Doctor of Nursing Practice. And my colleague invited me to those conversations. And from there, it was a small group of us. So it was the graduate nursing faculty, myself, and then my Writing Center colleague began planning a class that essentially would become Foundations of Scholarly Writing for the Advanced Nurse. The need for the course arose as a requirement from the nursing accrediting body. And I've included some initial conversations just so you could see what we were working with. The course is for the MSN DNP programs, we, the graduate faculty, talked about a 1-credit, 7-week pass-fail online. The course would be taken the first trimester along with the research course. I'm thinking that the textbook would be the APA manual, and it would be 4 weeks of grammar and punctuation and 3 yes, 3 weeks of APA rules, maybe sentence writing related to content from nursing research articles or something like that. What do you think? Yeah. That was my exact response. I was kind of like panic texting the group chat. But Foundations of Scholarly Writing, I think this is this is one of the descriptions that they were working with. Reinforces composition and writing skills for academic purposes, utilize citations and references from the institution's format. There's a lot of nursing things. Yeah. So on my end, I was like, no, this is not where we can end up. So my goal was like, we cannot stay here. So my goal was essentially to move away from a focus on service level writing and bring in writing studies scholarship, specifically threshold concepts, to the course. And some of my kind of initial notes and kind of thoughts on the course were thinking about how ideally the course would include 2 components. So WID activities that would engage students in exploring kinds of writing that they will do in their program, such as like genre analysis, thinking about the types of writing they're doing in the program, talking with faculty, and workshop activities that would engage students in substantial work of the research writing assignments being completed for the parallel research course or another genre that they are going to be doing. And then I had this pie in the sky idea about fellows. Yeah, that hasn't happened yet. Holding out hope for kind of a long-term collaboration between students. And my thoughts were that the course would be a pass-fail with assessment based more on kind of participation and reflection. And then thinking about how the course would hopefully join some type of writing group and thinking about the process of writing. Ultimately, we were thinking that it would be best to have paired with standing meetings kind of with the writing faculty and myself, and strengthen the connection between the course and the broader curriculum, and helping to shape the faculty's perceptions of what good writing looks like in that context. So from our initial perspectives, our first meeting focused more on what the nursing faculty value in writing. And so essentially, instead of saying like, oh no, I'm not having a course that has 4 weeks of grammar and 3 weeks of AP, just basically like, what do you value? Like, what are the things that you look for? And that was where we started. And these are kind of some of the notes that I took, which sometimes they are surface, but that's okay. It was a starting point. But similar to the first email about the class, our initial conversation did revolve mostly around surface concerns. And a lot of these first meetings was just listening to what the faculty were looking for and their concerns, and explaining which best practices in writing studies and the Writing Center work together to address their concerns about the overall goals of the course. So even with our different ideas and perspectives, this led to several wonderful meetings with the nursing faculty who they're so receptive, and they are like very clearly invested in the writing that their students do. So that was probably the best thing, is just that, we could say something like, well, we want to approach things this way. And they'd be like, okay, that sounds good. Sounds good. And even with our different ideals and perspectives, we kind of collaboratively developed the learning outcomes grounded in nursing scholarship, and they had to tie them to their accrediting body, which is a book called The Essentials of American Association of College of Nursing. But we picked out 3 main learning outcomes. So applying theory from nursing, the arts, humanities, and other sciences, communicating effectively with individuals, and advancing the scholarship of nursing. So with those kind of required competencies that they had to pick, we identified the learning outcomes, which is essentially adapting written communication to a target audience, evaluating research reports within the healthcare field, designing scholarly activities, and essentially how these would be achieved within the course. So early on in the process, we also explained the difficulty of creating and running a class like this over 7 weeks, which they were also very receptive to. So we changed the delivery of the course from 7 weeks, which is essentially our intensive like half term, to the full 14-week course. And knowing the potential student population of the incoming students and some of the students who are completing their MSN to DNP was another powerful tool in advocating for a full 14-week course. And this is because a lot of the student populations, they are working full-time as nurses already. There are many second language English students and a variety of ranges and ages. And some are recent grads, while a lot of the student population is returning after many years away from school. And the resulting course is one that is informed by threshold concepts and building on kind of referred expertise. So expertise across domains or expertise taken from one field and directly applied into another. And the expertise of threshold concepts of writing studies applied to the domain of graduate nursing students. And additionally, this course emphasized process, drafting, revising, and feedback. And the main way that we did that is by incorporating ELI review as a required tool. And this is kind of where we ended up. So framed by threshold concepts in nursing applied to, in writing applied to nursing, and ELI review, strong involvement from the Writing Center, 1 credit, 14 weeks, online, asynchronous. So from my perspective, and from the perspective of the nursing faculty, designing the course required some kind of concessions and compromises on both of our ends. So on your left, I suppose, those were some of the compromises that that I made. Yes. So on my part, I wanted, well, the course ended up being graded rather than pass fail just because of how their accrediting body works, which was fine. There were about 1 million observers in the course when I went to Canvas. I don't know how that happened. They're just there. All of the nursing faculty are just there in the course. And the writing intensive faculty in the nursing program, sorry. And then for the nursing faculty, some of these they don't, well, one of them they at least don't know about. The concessions that they made, which was ELI review, that we were going to be using this tool, and that I absolutely was not using Turnitin, no matter what they said. Wouldn't happen. So currently, I just finished the first, oops, one too far, the first pilot term of the course, which happened in the spring. And wanted to move away from working for and toward working with, especially with when I hand off this course to someone in the nursing department. And that is something that is challenging kind of at an institutional level at this point, because we very much have a culture of this is when we start the term, and the students go year round because we're on a trimester system. It's hard for faculty to take breaks, and faculty are willing to try new things, but it's sometimes hard to convince them because of the high workload. So moving away from like, how long do we have you to teach the course, to let's talk about how you would be comfortable taking on this course and making sure that you're supported. And thinking about increasing the WAC presence on campus. And part of that is just the whole pipeline of things that I have happening. Building excitement around writing, recognizing expertise and also where the limits of that expertise lie, and making the case for more writing instruction in the disciplines. But some of the kind of takeaways that I have found from this experience were similar to what Lauren said, is we were not talking about writing in the same way at all. We kind of had fundamental misunderstandings about who each of us are and what we do. So it was really challenging for people outside of the nursing program, perhaps, like making the case for a WAC program if they don't know about writing studies. Like people think I teach lit. And I'm like, no, I've been here for 5 years. I don't teach lit, but that's fine. We'll get there. But basically, it's hard for these other programs on campus to care about writing studies if they don't know who we are or what we do. And yes, these are the goals that I have moving forward. So I finished the pilot of the course, which was lovely. It was a great group of students. I really enjoyed working with them. But the goals are to kind of increase the WAC presence and hopefully encourage the nursing faculty to attend some workshops so that they feel comfortable taking on this shared responsibility of writing instruction within their program. and developing a study around this particular course, and also how this course relates to their, it's called the Scholarly Project in the DMP program. And that is it for me. So I will pass it over to Melissa.
All right, so let me get my screen sharing going. Okay, and slideshow. Okay, hi, I'm Melissa Forbes. I teach at Gettysburg College, which is a small liberal arts college in Pennsylvania with about 2,400 students. I feel like there might be some problems that have been happening with the Whova and Zoom integration. So if for some reason you can't see my slides or they're not advancing, please let me know. So at Gettysburg, I run the Writing Center and first year writing, and I also teach a 3-2 load. So from that mishmash of description, you can probably guess that I'm the only compositionist here, which is mostly fine, sometimes lonely, and occasionally very overwhelming. You will also note that there is no whack in my job description. Unlike the other two panelists, we don't have an official program, and I'm trying to sort of stealthily get that off the ground. The QR code is a Google folder with my slides and a transcript and a document that I'll be talking about later if that's something that you want. So, okay. I'm here today, or you're virtually here today, to talk about the similarities between WAC and academic librarians' work to work with information literacy, which I will about half and half refer to as IL, and how I might leverage those similarities to reduce the lift required as I'm trying to get this WAC program started all by my lonesome. So here's how that's going to go. Oh, there we go. First, I'm going to give you some background on how libraries have changed their conception of information literacy over the years, specifically leading to their embrace of threshold concepts. Then I'm going to talk about how this embrace of threshold concept has helped align their work with the work of WAC initiatives. And finally, I'm going to look at the specific work my institution's library is doing with their threshold concepts and talk about how that work might or might not translate to my own efforts. So 5 years ago, I married an academic librarian, which if you are an academic researcher, 10 out of 10 do recommend. And my husband also works at Gettysburg, which means we talk about work all the time, like very interesting people. We're hardly the first to figure this out, but it turns out there's a tremendous conceptual and pedagogical overlap in the work of writing instructors and the work of research and instruction librarians. Writing is iterative process, meet research is iterative process. Authority is constructed and contextual, meet authority is constructed and contextual. Rhetorical literacy, meet information literacy. So a lot of their threshold concepts are very similar to ours. So intro to information literacy. If you had asked me to define information literacy back when I first started dating my husband, I probably would have said something like the ability to not be snowed by bad information. And I am now so glad that nobody ever asked me. It turns out that although the term tends to be thrown around to describe everything from finding a research article to sussing out fake news, information literacy is actually something specific, even if what that something is has changed over the years. The phrase was coined in 1974 to talk about information finding skills people develop at work, but Addison and Myers have noted 3 overlapping waves of reconceptualization just in the 21st century. Information literacy as a set of skills, information literacy as a way of thinking, and information literacy as a social practice. Sample additionally pointed to a group of more recent definitions that treat information literacy as a threshold concept-based meta-literacy. So to see this evolution in action, I want to take a really quick look at contrasting the 2 most recent official information literacy paradigms. Back in 2020, the Association of College and Research Libraries, ACRL, approved the Information Literacy Competency Standards for Higher Education, which define information literacy in a very skill-based way. 16 years later, they actually rescinded the standards and replaced them with the Framework for Information Literacy in Higher Education, a set of 6 threshold concepts that offer more complex entry points to the stuff of IL. So let's take a quick look at that. Here are the 2 definitions. I don't know if we can maybe move. I don't know where the the Zoom thing is on your screen. Maybe we can move it out of the way, but so over here we have this set of abilities, recognizing when information is needed, locating, evaluating, using, very skills-based. And on the right, we have the set of integrated abilities encompassing reflective discovery, understanding how information is produced and values, use of information, and creating new knowledge. Okay, so the definitions are significantly different. And when we look and we compare the actual standards to the actual frames in the framework, those are very different as well. And I'll give you a second to take a look at those. So one side is very, very outcomes based and the other is more concept based. We can see this evolution from skills to threshold concepts happening in just a 16-year period. So for people in writing studies, both the move toward frameworks and threshold concepts and the concepts themselves feel pretty familiar. Maid and D'Angelo and Alabi et al. Have both written about similarities between the IL framework and the CWPA framework for success in post-secondary writing from 2011. In fact, here's a chart from Alabi et al. Comparing learner dispositions from the IL framework to habits of mind from the WPA. When displayed side by side, they write, the similarities are difficult to miss. Indeed, right? So also, as the term has become more theoretically robust, it's also occasionally been accused of being ginned up to falsely protect librarians' expertise. Just one more thing that our fields have in common. I don't know if anybody came across this lovely little exchange a few months ago, but okay. So moving on to part 3, now that we've talked about information literacy. So I too attended last year's WAC Summer Institute. And when I got back and started talking to my husband and thinking about the project in front of me, I realized that if normally our Venn diagram looks like this, once I started doing WAC stuff, it looks a lot more like this. So we have a lot more overlap once we start talking about WAC. It moves beyond similarities and concepts that I talked about earlier and into the stuff of what we do, the whole rhetorical situation that we're operating in. So for instance, both writing and IL are often simultaneously valued and oversimplified by people outside the field. Information literacy, like writing, is regularly name-checked by faculty and administration as a crucial skill for graduating students to have mastered, and yet IL, again like writing, is often misapprehended by people outside the discipline and reduced to lower-order components. Our help them learn grammar is their help them learn citations. The same contextless limbo is home to both our generic academic paper and their generic peer-reviewed research article. Both are often treated as isolated practical skills in the service of the real content. And this is actually part of the motivation for the shift to the information literacy framework in the first place. So as we know, both WAC and IL try to push back on the inoculation model. Just like we know that a first-year writing class isn't a lifetime writing achievement award, librarians struggle with seeing information literacy not just oversimplified, but also siloed off from the rest of the intellectual work of the course. And yet, students encounter both writing and IL primarily through non-specialists. I mean, yeah, we have writing classes and methods classes and one-shot library instruction, but the vast majority of the messaging students receive about both writing and information literacy comes in the context of courses that are primarily about something else and via people who have little to no specific training in our pedagogies. Our job is to figure out how to get our disciplinary knowledge, practices, and dispositions into the classroom from the outside. This means that both WAC work and IL work are a form of ambassadorship or sales or proselytizing. To put it super crassly, both WAC work and IL instruction involve attempting to interfere in someone else's teaching practices. And that's never going to go well if they haven't been convinced of the value of what we bring to the table. So why does it matter so much that libraries have shifted to the threshold concept model and our approaches map onto one another so closely? Because for all our similarities, there is a giant difference between WAC and information literacy at Gettysburg. And it looks like this. So as you can see, there are a lot of people who work at the library. And the people who work on WAC are standing before you at the moment. On the one hand, this can be genuinely depressing. when I'm trying to cobble together one faculty-facing resource on effective peer workshops, and my husband is meeting with his colleagues to start year 2 of their 3-year cyclical programmatic assessment plan based on all the data they've collected and focusing on frames 2 and 6 of the framework, sometimes I have to say out loud to myself that it's not that I'm bad at my job, it's just that there's only one of me. On the other hand, the more closely our goals mirror each other, the more the idea that there's only one of me isn't strictly true. The infrastructure and strategies they've developed for their ambassadorship are not only a good fit for my WAC-related goals, but are also responsive to our particular institutional context. Moreover, even if they're often treated as though they practice a trade rather than a discipline, the librarians at Gettysburg have an actively excellent reputation on campus. So following their template will help legitimize my fledgling efforts. So that brings us to part 3, what Musselman Library talks about when they talk about information literacy. So the IL framework is super specific about the fact that while it's going to provide the guiding concepts when it comes to developing outcomes, individual libraries are on their own. So then obviously the first thing I want to look at is how do they talk about, how do they personalize these threshold concepts for our institutional context? Oh, shoot. Oh, there it is. Whew. I thought I did not. I'm going nuts here. Apologies. There we go. All right. So this is also in the Google folder that I linked, and maybe we can make this a little bit bigger. Okay. So the first thing I want to highlight is right here in the second paragraph. In collaboration with teaching faculty, librarians at Musselman Library serve as active partners in the development of these necessary skills. So our faculty can be, like many, I would guess, can be a little touchy if they feel like someone's telling them what to do. So foregrounding in the second sentence that this is a collaboration and not somebody from the outside telling you what to do is an astute move contextually. Second paragraph provides a definition. Third paragraph explains where this comes from. They're grounded in the expertise of the field. We are not making them up, we swear. But then immediately after that, they connect to our curriculum, the specifics of Gettysburg curriculum, and they even quote a section that mentions communication and information. Similarly, down here, we have 3 whole bullet points that are connecting to faculty learning goals, course and department levels, curricular element on communication skills. And it's only this far down that they sort of start to assert a little bit of expertise, right? Saying, we should give them sequential opportunities. And above all, we emphasize the teaching of concepts over skills as a means to achieve our mission of educating lifelong learners. There's just this one little thing we feel strongly about, and it should probably completely shape the way that you teach this, but it's not a big deal, kind of slipped into there. So after this, they look at each of the 6 frames, and I think they do a good job of walking this tightrope of both unpacking what makes each of these concepts kind of complex, and then also connecting them to actual learning outcomes. And one thing I want to show here is if we go back to the slides, the threshold concepts outcomes over here in blue are so much more interesting than the outcomes from the standards. And that means that the threshold concepts are much more interesting than the standards. And that means that the outcomes are more interesting too, right? Understands assignment guidelines, identify key concepts, terms, develop research concepts or questions versus recognize that research is an iterative process, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So the takeaways here are to 1, demonstrate that WAC is a service to faculty, students, and the curriculum rather than some kind of power grab. 2, provide evidence that threshold concepts aren't just arbitrary and both come out of a discipline and connect to our institutional context. 3, break down the threshold concepts to unpack what they mean and illustrate their complexity. And 4, create outcomes that show what those concepts actually look like when mobilized. So for each of these things, I've sort of developed this checklist. So is this achievable by one person? Yes, I think it is. Is it sustainable by one person? Again, yes, I think it is. Although there's a caveat. I asked my husband how they distribute these outcomes to faculty, and it turns out that they kind of don't. They're on the website if you know where to look. But generally speaking, this has ended up being more of an internal than an external document. So if we're talking about adaptations, I would want to share that more widely. If I'm going to put the effort into making something like this, I want as many people to see it as possible. So the next thing we have is an information literacy grant. This comes through our Center for Teaching and Learning. And they can offer this to 1 to 3 faculty members a year. So this is the gold standard of what we want to do to get our threshold concepts out there, right? We are working one-on-one with people, fully initiating people into what information literacy is about, collaborating deeply, we have on here, infusing an entire course with information literacy and research skills, integrating research with academic content. I could probably change that to say subject-specific content. Sequencing, it's beautiful, no oversimplification, no inoculation, no more on the outside looking in. Is this achievable by one person? Maybe if I were to keep the numbers low. Is it sustainable by one person? Oh no, it's not. It's actually, in my opinion, not even sustainable by all those people that we just saw on the library staff page. It's an amazing program that develops an intensive relationship between the librarian and the faculty member, and most faculty find it so rewarding that they want to do it again the next time they teach the class, and then the next time, and then the next, and it stacks up as more and more people participate in the program. One semester, I watched my husband be a full partner with 4 different faculty while also doing the rest of his full-time job. And the worst part is the college won't even allow the librarians to share in the stipend. So that's bullshit. And we're trying to fix it, but that's the situation. So I do have 2 ideas for adapting this that maybe I'm going to push over to the library as well. One is an idea that you build the grant so each recipient is responsible for assisting with the people the following year. So this could potentially not only offload some of the labor, but also strengthen their skills and confidence and train additional ambassadors. The other is to bring people in as a cohort and place more emphasis on guided collaboration and workshopping among the group than on one-on-one partnerships with me. Either way, the schema already exists and we just have to sort of adapt it for my purposes. The final thing that the library does to sort of impart their threshold concepts to the rest of the college is individual consultation. So in addition to the one-shot instruction that they offer, the librarians offer assignment and instruction design consultation to faculty who want to increase engagement with IL in their courses. So in one case, a psychology professor wanted students to do a project that had them writing for the public. So the instructor and the librarian worked together to design an op-ed assignment that asked students to, among other things, engage with the rhetoric of citation and how that changes between an academic and a public audience. So is this achievable by one person? Yeah, at a small scale, right? The librarians each serve as a liaison to 2 or 3 departments. So grant recipients notwithstanding, they have a finite number of people who are going to come to them for this service. And those people generally share a discourse community so they can sort of work from a knowledge base that's shared among the people they're working with. I would not have this luxury, so I would need to find a way to limit my availability more. Is it sustainable? Is it sustainable by one person? Again, I think so. If we can achieve it, I think we can sustain it because we would have already made it bite-sized enough. Adaptations, originally I was trying to say, this would work better for me during the summer. And then I remembered I'm a 9-month appointment. So we're not doing that. In that vein, however, it might work if instead of just announcing open season on my schedule, I sort of would announce days for consultation or a few slots at a time. And alternatively, and assuming high enough interest, we could follow the collaborative assignment design communities model that we were going to that I talked about for the grants. Okay, so finally, as we sort of close out, I tend to think about all of my jobs, Writing Center, first year writing, and now WAC, in 2 parts. First, we've got building a functional machine and then keeping that machine running. The library can only give me the blueprints for their machine. They can't build me a machine or help me keep a machine running. But considering that WAC isn't even technically part of my job, that's a pretty good head start. But even beyond the practical aspects, our shared endeavor of advocating for our threshold concepts gives me a whole group of people I can bounce ideas off of who understand where I'm coming from and where I'm trying to go. And on the lonely days, that is a bounty all its own. And that is what I have to say about that. Thank you.
So we're gonna open it up to questions. I'll hand the microphone so Melissa can hear them as well. Is that okay with you, Melissa?
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Sure, okay. If there are any questions.
I have a lot of thoughts, but just on a practical note, Melissa, I tried to get your QR code and it didn't lead me to a link. I don't know if other people had that
Oh,
problem.
no.
So just wanted to let you know that. And I just also just wanted to, Lauren and Melissa, your descriptions of sort of your positions and like where you are just so resonated with me. So I have a lot of questions and thoughts and I'm still trying to pull them together, but I just wanted to share that like logistical, practical point.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Sorry.
I think that's too, like, as you say, the resonating is one of the benefit I have found of like the conference and the Summer Institute of just like when you're the only person being like, what am I doing? And then coming here and going, oh, we're all asking that question of what am I doing? And it's just really nice to have those people to talk to in these spaces.
So I'm interested in the possibility that there's not just like threshold concepts for writing, but that maybe there's threshold concepts for administration of WAC programs as well. Things that we all struggle to learn, but eventually internalize maybe to a greater or lesser extent. I think one of them for me that I'm just kind of talking here. It's not a question. I'm doing that thing. I'm sorry, but maybe just open conversation some. So what all across all three of you, I see maybe a concept of our disciplinary knowledge cannot be imposed, but must be negotiated with folks in other disciplines. And I see that in your questionnaire. And I see that in the way that you had to kind of work with them to develop the curriculum for the course. And Melissa, I see that in the way that you're thinking about the relationships with information literacy, but also the way that, that comment about faculty resistance, about just kind of being told what to do as well. So I'm curious, like, does that resonate with others as like a tricky thing to learn? I feel like I'm always relearning it too. Yeah. Nice. Yeah.
I was just going to say, feeding off of that, I found that really intriguing, the idea of threshold concepts for WAC directorship. And I'm thinking, Sarah had shown a slide of the book Sustainable WAC by Cox, Galen, and Melzer. And I've been involved with their consortium. And really there are 15 strategies that are part of that whole systems approach to WAC sustainability. And I'm thinking another label for strategies might be, because many of them are conceptual, so they are kind of threshold or threshold concepts for WAC directorship. So that might be a place to look. Okay, and shameless plug for our session on Saturday at 9. I'm presenting on the last day, but we'll be talking a little bit about that whole systems approach, and so.
Getting my steps in, Melissa.
Hi. So my question, I guess, is for all three panelists, and this was so fascinating to me, and I thank you all for your work here. But when I try to talk to my colleagues, I'm in a smaller arts college, and when I use like the language of threshold concepts, I find that I get some eye rolls, and I get some faculty being like, okay, well, that's not really what we do here. And so I wonder if you can talk about how the work you put into sort of educating your colleagues about like the importance of threshold concepts and how you get them to buy into threshold concepts as a concept. Does that question make sense? Yeah.
Melissa, do you have a response, or Sarah?
Well, I mean, I do feel I'm a little bit behind in comparison to the other two, in that I'm, like I said, sort of stealthily doing this. So I don't have as much to contribute to this. I will say I'm also on a committee that has been redesigning our curriculum, and even just trying to introduce some of our threshold concepts has received a little bit of pushback and almost, it seems like sometimes willful misunderstanding. So what I've been focusing on the people who seem on board and encouraging them to sort of spread the good word, as it were. And I think talking to people about what threshold concepts might look like in their own fields as well has been useful. And also I'm a pretty tight partner with our Center for Teaching and Learning, and getting out there with that has helped me establish a presence that I think will help me as I start to move forward in this, and maybe even have a whole session on like, what do threshold concepts look like in your discipline and why should you care, and that sort of thing. So that would be my answer.
So I would say, yes, I agree with, like, it is something that's kind of difficult. But also a lot of the faculty are very receptive that I've met with, but in surprising ways. Like, for example, I met with the DNAP program, the anesthesia program, and I had this whole kind of hour-long workshop prepared to talk about the rhetorical nature of writing. And we spent the entire hour talking about like why you assign writing. Like, we just spent the whole hour talking about purpose. And I was like, oh, okay, cool, like I'll take it. So it was just very surprising, like where they were at versus where I thought they were at, and kind of just meeting them where they were and just running with that.
Yeah, I think I would just add to that. I was thinking of from the Summer Institute, Chris Elder had said of like, I don't have time for the critics. And that's like something I've internalized. I don't have time for the critics. And that's something I've just like, I very much work with the people that are willing right now. And that's just kind of where I am time wise. I know there's some things going on in engineering and I'm like, you will be another year's problem. It ain't this year. So like I'm working with the willing, and I'm just a bit like, this is what we're doing. You signed up, you're coming, and I know they're willing and they're fabulous faculty too. So if they have feelings, maybe they're not sharing them because I'm like, this is great. Look at what we're gonna do. Oh, did you? Oh, sorry. Oh, I'll go to, I'll come to you next.
So this is really more just a comment. We do a lot of work with threshold concepts too. And one of the things that I have been thinking about is sort of framing it as like an appeal to their expertise, right? You know so much about research in your area. You know so much about writing in your area. And it's become, internalized to you. And so now there's this like expert novice gap. And so, it's not that they're doing something wrong. It's just they know so much, so that it's not, a deficit way of thinking, but you're the expert. Let's help you figure out how to get this knowledge to your students.
And we frame it too in terms of like learning bottlenecks. So we don't introduce threshold concepts off the bat, but have them talk about where their students might be struggling, and then start to point them to the framework for information literacy, put some language around that, and what are the things that I need to model for my students if they're not demonstrating in their work. And so they become interested in threshold concepts, but we're not necessarily immersing them within that realm in the same way.
Very positive approach to it, very affirming.
So yeah, just a minor comment about Sarah, when you had that interjection. I'm interested in what you said because there's a DMP program at my school and like my school also has a very strong identity around a strong nursing program. So what you're doing is really fascinating. So it seems like to me that it's like, for me looking in, like outside looking in, like that it's a huge win because there was so much like structurally that changed. But it's also like you had comments about, oh, they think that I teach literature and that sort of thing. And this is maybe just too big and globular to really get into too much. And maybe it's just a thought, but there's this like extra layer of like, what is the expertise that you know, someone in these positions or straddling these many identities brings. And like, does the identity they bring matter? Like in terms of like what, and is it content expertise or is it practices or what is it? You know, it just seems like an extra mental kind of baggage. Unless you have like, you know, kind of one-off stuff that it's like, I don't have time for the critics, or just little things that you say to yourself, you know, and I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but I just wanted to kind of bring that up.
Lauren, one thing that really resonated with me with what you were saying is like, I'm also at a small liberal arts college. And I also have received a lot of hats to wear. But this idea that like a small institution, you would think that you would know, like sort of have the scope is smaller. So you'd have a sense of like the larger curricular, you know, like movements, but they feel like I right now feel like I have been swept up in this thing that I did not start. I did not like, it was not my idea. So I'm just curious about that writing intensive sort of front end of the timeline that you had. How did you like, did those writing intensive courses get sort of established and then you sort of like kind of jumped in with the work that you're doing? Or did you become involved in like sort of how those courses were defined and who taught them and sort of how they were sort of assessed? So just thinking about this, like being in this stream, like, you know, and then stepping into it moment.
Yeah, so luckily I was on that committee right when that first like proposal for them of like, we should do these. So I was there from the get-go. And the only thing involved with them is that they have 2 learning objectives. That's the only thing that makes a writing intensive course is objectives. So I ran the group that wrote those objectives. And then I also ran the group that established the rubric for assessment then. So I've been with those. But that's kind of all that's happening with them. I've kind of inserted myself in them more in terms of if a writing intensive course is being offered, I will observe it. Then too, it's not required. I just kind of email and I'm like, hey, I'll do your peer observation this semester now that you're offering this. And they're like, great. So they're receptive to that. But I think that's part of the larger core revision, that it was such a big revision and programs were freaking out so much. And also the amount of credits got reduced at that time too. So programs had so much on their plates that the writing intensive was a bit of the like last thing they were worrying about, which I thought for me in the end ended up being good. Because we're now slowly launching them. We've only had about 5 or 6 runs so far, and now we're ramping them up. And then I've just kind of built the WAC in of like, well, if I'm going to run these, I'm building a WAC program too. So I've used them as like, we're doing both.
What do you find is, sorry, talking about that a little bit. What do you find in the context of a small liberal arts college? This is a huge question, sorry. What does WAC mean? Like that's different in a small liberal arts college context, would you say, for you?
That's an interesting, that's an interesting question because I don't know what, other than what I've read of what it looks like at a big university, I only know it at mine. Yeah, I'm curious if anyone else has ideas.
Well, just thinking, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all right. I'm at a comprehensive university, but one with a very large core curriculum. So it has that liberal arts, you know, it used to be liberal arts. And one thing I've sort of discovered over the years is how much more WAC resides in our core, right? Because we have our majors and we have our WID, but then there's more than that, that there's a you know, vast number of faculty across disciplines who are teaching in our huge core curriculum, and that's where WAC starts with us. And then, you know, it leads to the writing in the discipline. But we have all these other sorts of WAC courses, writing intensive and writing to learn. And so to me, that's a big difference when I talk to colleagues who are at research universities or seem more focused on wit.
Melissa, did you want to add something to that?
Sure. I wanted to say, just having gone to I mean, as most of us probably did, like a larger university for the PhD, I feel like the machine there had a lot more people in it to handle this sort of thing, which, as I was saying, just sometimes maybe even having somebody to show the flyer and be like, how does this flyer look? Can be such a load off, you know? And there's just like, nobody like knocking on my chair's door. I'm like, hi, Catherine, can I show you this? Like, somebody, like more people who are invested in it to work with, I think lightens the stress load. But one advantage I think that being at a smaller college has had for me is I have friends in lots of departments. I know people. Our faculty meetings are full faculty meetings. Everybody's there. They're not like faculty senate or something like that. And so there is this greater opportunity to touch and talk to a huge proportion of the people who are teaching at the college. And I think that is a really big boon of the environment.
So with that, I think we're going to end on that note. Thank you all for coming. We so enjoyed having you here, and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks. Bye. Good to
See you. Enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
I'm trying to get it up. Yeah, really impressed with the floor. That was the vision, right? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm the editing collection. And so I'm just trying to drum up ideas for projects. Your